So my background, Rob, is I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for 35 years and also a registered midwife. Most of my career was actually spent in the birth suite, and so I have a real passion for supporting people to create and work with them to create a family. The last 14 years of my career, I moved into the IVF space, and I've been working predominantly with infertility clients. So I also became a hypnobirth educator, but my real passion during that phase has definitely been supporting couples and who are wanting to create a family, and making sure that they're using real evidence-based solutions and providing them with a lot of support. So the role as a nurse, as an IVF nurse, a lot of it is support and counselling. And, you know, it has been actually a really rewarding area of nursing to be in as well. So 3 years ago, I actually got introduced to Zinzino. And it was just by chance. A very good friend of mine, she actually threw me one of these test kits, and she said to me, Margie, you need to take a look at this, because I'd been taking omega supplements for 20 years. And she said, yeah, I know, you need to understand what the latest research has come out with omegas, and, you know, we can now test to see whether the omega product you've been using is actually hitting the target value. So, of course, I took the test. And I was pretty shocked, because I was taking a very well-known brand and thinking I was doing the right thing, and my ratio came back at 8.5 to 1. So I was pretty shocked by that. And then, of course, I was jumped on the balance concept, so the balance oil, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in my discussion. But what compelled me then, Rob, to go on to do was to share this with the people that I knew, of course, my family and my friends, because I understood that this had the ability to identify where there was something that wasn't going right, introduce an omega product that is unique in the marketplace to correct those imbalances and actually get me into the target values that I needed to be. So when we're talking about the art of conception, we're talking about health, cellular health, and we're talking about things that really impact eggs and sperm, and of course the microbiome. So, and that's what really impressed me with Zinzino, because you know, I was very fortunate that the IVF clinic that I worked in, I was working with some incredible IVF specialists who really took an interest in this concept. So I took it to them and said, you know, this is what I've discovered. I actually think we can use this with our clients, and we can improve the outcomes for them. So improve their IVF outcomes and success to pregnancy. So I was really fortunate that I did start to use the balance concept with our IVF patients. And as a consequence, we saw some incredible shifts in inflammatory markers and in restoring microbiome more recently. But for most people who are listening to the call, they may not know that like 1 in 6 couples actually do experience infertility. And it's interesting, Rob, because the same factors that drive infertility is what drives chronic illness. And although, you know, there's certainly factors around infertility that we can't control, there might be factors we can't change and we can't control, there's certainly a lot that we can do to have a positive impact on fertility. And that's what I want to talk to you about tonight. And I'd like for everyone to share this information perhaps with other people who are trying to conceive, because there are areas that we do have a lot of control over that we can make a positive impact on. So there's a lot of research and, you know, a lot of evidence now that points in the direction that elevated inflammation and oxidative stress can negatively damage the quality of the egg, the quality of the sperm, and of course, reduce the rates of fertilization and conception. So, you know, what we have with Zinzino, with our balance concept, in fact, the whole health protocol actually can work in a positive way to correct this. And it's really interesting because couples that go through IVF undergo an enormous amount of stress. They undergo an enormous amount of guilt and uncertainty. They undergo an enormous amount of financial burden. They're faced with a lot of uncertainty. Will the treatment work? Won't it work? But they often want to rush into the treatment, and they've identified that perhaps there is an infertility factor, and they just want to fix that straight away. What a lot of fertility clinics will do, they do an enormous amount of investigative work in looking at all their baseline bloods and scans, semen analysis. There's a lot of investigations that go on. But what's really interesting is that detecting low-grade inflammation and oxidative stress is actually not a routine procedure in the fertility pathology. And that's why I was so compelled to share this balance test with the clients that were coming through the clinic that I was working in. Because what we could do with the Zinzino balance test is actually identify inflammatory markers and then really put the pieces of the puzzle together with a lot of these the factors that people were having treatment for. So I just want to explain what some the cohorts of people that we would see, conditions that we do see increased inflammation in. And one of the big ones that is really, really frustrating for couples is that they will be labelled as unexplained infertility. And this is a really difficult area to sit in as a couple because, they might be young, they might be fit, they might be healthy on the outside, but no one's actually looked at their inflammatory marker. And we know that over 70% of women with unexplained infertility have really high levels of inflammation and oxidative stress. And this can actually be picked up with the balance test. So another area is polycystic ovary syndrome. So women that have PCOS often have really chronic low-grade inflammation. They also have a lot of circulating inflammatory proteins, which leads to insulin resistance and a disruption in their menstrual period. So this is another area that we can really focus on with the health protocol and correct those areas. Endometriosis, that's another area. In fact, 20% of people who actually seek fertility treatment, that's the whole reason that they're coming for treatment, because endometriosis is an estrogen-driven inflammatory condition, and oxidative stress and inflammation are associated with the progression of that condition. So, male factor, that is another area that inflammation and oxidative stress play a significant role in male factor infertility. And inflammation underpins, sperm damage, and it's also been linked to recurrent pregnancy loss. So all of these areas are areas that we can support people in Zinzino to control inflammation and restore the microbiome. So if we can adopt, and have this conversation with people and say, have you had your inflammatory marker checked? Often the answer is no. And as I said, Rob, I was really lucky. I had fertility specialists who recognised that what was going on in Zinzino was unique, and they recognised that there is no other company that is a test-based nutritional approach. It's scientifically backed. So I was really fortunate that we started to use the concept with them, as I said. And I just want to point out the interesting thing is with endometriosis as well. Yes, it's an inflammatory condition, but as soon as we start to use the balance oil with these women, their pain measurements. So normally they'd be a 10 out of 10, they drop to about a 3 out of 10 in their very first cycle. So the balance oil works extremely quickly into dampen inflammatory stress. So I want to explain why. So the concept that I'm talking about is I'll first discuss why the balance oil works so effectively with these groups of people, is because, I mean, everyone does know about omega-3, but not everyone knows that recently there was a study done in 2020. It was released, the Fertility and Sterility, where they looked at the effects of dietary intervention that was done 6 weeks prior to couples having IVF. And what they looked at, they specifically looked at, so it was a double-blinded randomized controlled trial. One group was the control group, and one group was a group that had been given olive oil, omega-3, and vitamin D. And what they found, that the group that were using the olive oil, vitamin D, and omega-3 actually had improved embryo development following IVF and ICSI. So, you know, this is all recent research that's being done. And guess what the balance oil is? The balance oil is olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, omega-3, and vitamin D3. So it's proven to have an enhanced absorption into the body. And the interesting thing with the olive oil, the polyphenols acts as a really powerful antioxidant, and it's actually protecting and chaperoning the omega molecule long enough till it reaches the cell membrane. And that's when you can see the reduction in that inflammatory stress happening in every single cell in the body. And so what this means, this is really good news for fertility, because if we can reduce the inflammatory stress, we can improve these conditions that I talked about, and we can have a greater success to pregnancy. So, you know, it's confusing for couples when they're undergoing IVF. They get thrown lots of complementary therapies. They don't know what works, what doesn't work. They're told to take an omega supplement. Please, if you know someone who's trying to conceive, please tell them about the balance oil, because we know that this is stable in the body for 35 hours. It's unique because of the formulation, and we know it works. So the plan is to test, look at the inflammatory markers, and what we know from the research, these cohorts of people have high inflammatory markers. Take the balance oil for 120 days, get tested again, and you'll see that that inflammatory marker has dropped. So I'm talking about, you know, essential fatty acids, omega-6 and omega-3. These are essential fats that our body cannot create. We have to consume. And the majority of the population, as we know from our statistics, is that 97% of the population are deficient in omega-3. And it's just because it's difficult to source these omegas. So the balance oil is a very easy solution. It's just something you take every single day. And the other thing I want to point out too, Rob, is that test that I was talking about, it's really important for everyone to know that this test is an independent third-party laboratory test. It goes to VITAS, which is an analytical lab in Norway, and it's famous for chromatography. So a lot of the research universities all use VITAS. Zinzino just happens to be one of their partners. So we're very lucky to have all our laboratory tests done with VITAS. The turnaround, as you know, is extremely fast. You know, even here from Australia, on the other side of the world, we're getting the results back, you know, in 2 weeks. I heard someone say the other day that said, wow, the results were back in 12 days. I was like, wow, I think that's a record. But like, you know, that's incredible, isn't it? For what's happening. So yeah, so definitely you want to be telling these people to jump onto the balance oil. The second area that we can control is restoring the gut microbiome. Now, this is fundamental to optimizing fertility. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that we have to have a healthy microbiome for you to be fertile. So, and the best source of to nourish your gut microbiome is to feed it with prebiotic fibers. So unfortunately, the majority of the population, and this is global, we don't consume enough fiber, and we certainly don't have enough diversity of fiber. So where that leaves us is that we have dysbiosis in the gut, and the bad bacteria take over and cause a world of problems. So our gut microbiome is regulating fertility, okay, because it impacts our immune system, it impacts our sex hormones, it impacts our metabolism, and it also impacts our mood. As we know, there's a gut-brain connection. So where do we get prebiotic fibers from? Well, thanks to Zinzino, they've come up with a cracker. So the prebiotic fiber, the xenobiotic, is something that is really unique in the marketplace again, and it's 8 undigestible fibers. So we need to have non-digestible fibers in our diet because the fermentation process that takes place are the components that need to be in the large bowel. So most of our microbiome live in the large colon, and a lot of products don't have enough diversity of fiber to reach the large colon. And the beneficial components that I'm talking about from that fermentation process is short-chain fatty acids. And the role of the short-chain fatty acid is to reduce the growth of the bad bacteria, which is really important. And as a consequence, it dampens down inflammation in the gut, which again, we know that's a big area of concern, people who are trying to conceive or struggling to conceive, and it maintains gut permeability. So the xenobiotic, as I said, is incredible because it is a scientifically formulated product that the scientists have timed the transit time of the fermentation through the colon. So what that means that every single part of our colon is being provided with fermentation. So bacteria are constantly being generated, and that fermentation process produces the short-chain fatty acids. And of course, the more short-chain fatty acids you have, the happier your gut microbiome is, meaning the healthier your sperm will be, the healthier your eggs will be, and the healthier your uterus will be. So those two components are absolutely essential to create success to pregnancy. And of course, the third pillar of the health protocol is Extend. Unfortunately, we don't have it here yet in Australia, but that is absolutely the winning formula to have dampen chronic inflammatory stress at a cellular level, restore the gut microbiome, and provide an immune complex with multi-microphytonutrients to add back all those things that we just can't get from the foods that we eat today. So I'm really excited about continuing to support couples through their fertility journey. I still have today doctors who are telling their patients to contact me so to get on our product because they know it works. So I'm collaborating with a lot of people in the fertility arena, and I would encourage you all to share this information and get it out to as many people as possible. So I'm just so grateful that, you know, I've had the opportunity to work with Zinzino, and yeah, as a consequence, I'm helping many, many people, not just in Australia, across the globe. And yeah, and it's exciting time. It's an exciting time, Rob, because Zinzino are pioneers in test-based nutrition. I know they've got lots of things in store for us. Even today, you know, yes, I've been working with Zinzino in Australia for 3 years, but I really feel we're just starting to get traction here. And really, people are saying, oh, yeah, I've heard about Zinzino. Yeah, I've heard about Zinzino. So, yeah, it's a really exciting time. So, yes.
I think so, Margie. The key, you just said it before, you know, when people were taking another product or they've been sort of went to the pharmacy or to wherever to look for an immediate,
Rob,
those things.
Yeah, I think people get quite surprised that our products have such a rapid, profound impact on that inflammatory factor. because I mean, I know that we recommend testing and retesting in 120 days, but you know, we've got cases where we're testing 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. So we know from those results that we see, just doing that, how quickly that inflammation can be dampened. And it really is, that's exciting, because we know then we're making a difference. So I encourage everyone, regardless whether you think you are on the most exceptional, highestly recognized brand, naturopathic branded Omega, please get tested, because although that is a good product, the formulation doesn't contain polyphenols, and it's the polyphenols that stabilize, chaperone, and protect the Omega molecule long enough till it reaches the cell membrane. The other products are oxidizing in 9 hours. So when we test them, and we've got data now on over 855,000 samples, we know that those products are not reaching the cell membrane. So they're not in optimal ranges, even if they're having an exceptional diet and they're taking that product. So, and when people recognize that and they see the results with our test-based approach, then they automatically change over. So they get to understand, and they understand it's evidence-based, it's all scientifically researched. So yeah, so it's, and the other thing too, people say, but if you know that I've got inflammation, why should I even get tested? Just give me the product. But what we do know is that when you do get tested, it gives you a window and insight into exactly where you're sitting with your own health. And that's important too, because often that's just the first step to make positive behavior changes. Because if it is a low chronic inflammatory condition, so there's no symptomatic signs, like I said, in unexplained infertility, for example, or, you know, it's something that you need to know, because then you are really motivated as well. Like I said, you're going to make positive steps in the right direction, because no one sits around thinking, oh, that's great, I've got inflammation, I know that leads to chronic disease, let's just put up with that. Well, if they do, they don't place their health as a priority. But when someone's motivated to have a baby, they will do whatever it takes. So the test is a real piece of the puzzle that we can show couples and say, yep, here is an area that hasn't been looked at. Here is an area that we can control, we can fix, we can help you and set you on a path for success. Yeah, and I think this is so exciting, Rob. We've got like the vitamin D, we've got the balance test now, we've got the HbA1c. This is exciting for practitioners to have on hand, because often what will happen, people's health will start to decline, they'll go off to the GP, and then they'll run a test like that. What we're doing with Zinzino, we're working in the preventative health space. So we're not waiting to become unwell and then get tested. We're saying, okay, you're ticking along okay at the moment, but let's just check in. Let's see where you're sitting and see, are you at risk? Okay. And that's what I love about Zinzino. And that test in particular is exceptional, because it's allowing you the opportunity to just check in, see where you're at. But it's three-dimensional, it's multi-dimensional. It's not just saying, oh, you've got elevated, you know, you're at risk of type 2 diabetes. It's like, okay, we see you're at risk. We're also going to give you a set of tools to make sure we set you on a path for better health, so you can reduce that risk and reverse the risk of that developing. So, you know, there's educational tools, there's dietary advice. So, you know, it's not just a test. Yeah. It's and from a preventative health space measure, I think that's fantastic. Yeah. Things that you can take control of, and we know that by reducing your inflammatory stress and restoring your gut microbiome, we know that will have a positive effect on your success to pregnancy and success in treatment outcomes.